Hi, this is Deacon Joe. The saint of the week for this week is St. Anthony of Padua, whose feast day is the 13th of June. He's the patron of the poor, he's the patron of travelers, and he's also the patron of those searching for lost items, which so many of us do. There's some things about St. Anthony that you need to know. First, he's not an Italian. He was born in Portugal, of a family from the minor nobility, and he entered religious life at a relatively early age and studied to be a priest, and he served at the cathedrals in Lisbon and in the capital Coimbra. While there, he devoted himself to study of the scriptures and to theology. Now, what was exciting was that he had done this for about 10 years when some Franciscans came by. They were bringing the remains, the martyred remains of the first Franciscans to go to North Africa and try and preach to the Muslims, where they were martyred. St. Anthony was so impressed by the zeal that they had that he stopped what he was doing, petitioned and entered the Franciscans, and took the name Anthony. Because as we know from the scriptures, when you change your name, you change your reality. He had such zeal for souls that he left his life of relative obscurity and joined the Franciscans. So he went to Italy. While he was there, he was a teacher. He was one of the first priests in the Franciscan order. And so he was one of the few who actually knew some theology. So he spent the first 5 years as a Franciscan, again in obscurity, teaching theology to the young friars, young zealous Franciscans. He was at an ordination. They had no one to speak. And so he got up and extemporaneously gave a beautiful speech that so astounded everyone that the Franciscans moved him from teaching young zealous Franciscans to preaching to the heretics all through Italy and southern France. He preached, he was known as the hammer of the heretics, because he had such force and he had such ability to convert hearts. But he did it with love, and he did it with charity, and he did it with kindness, so that even a bishop who was not leading the best of lives was converted and knelt at St. Anthony's feet to receive pardon. Now that's a man for any priest to emulate. But also, he had a great love to do the will of God. One time he was arguing with someone, or he was trying to convince someone of the reality of Christ in the Eucharist. And the man refused, just flat refused. This is in the town of Rimini. And so St. Anthony made a deal. If I can get your mule to recognize Christ in the Eucharist, will you believe? The man said, of course. So they set a date 3 days later, and they would meet in the market square. Well, what the man did was he starved his poor mule, and when it came time, the mule showed up with a huge pile of hay, delicious hay for the mule. St. Anthony, meanwhile, had been fasting for 3 days for this man's soul, and when he showed up in the market square, he held the monstrance up, and the account goes that the mule, even though he was being beaten by his master, even though he was starving, knelt before our Lord in the Blessed Sacrament. And that, for all of us dumbasses, is a good reminder of who Christ is. Why St. Anthony is so impressive to me is because, one, my wife can find anything when she asks for his help, so you know he's right there with us. The second is that his love for Christ translated into his actions, and that whatever Christ wanted him to go and do, he'd go and do, even if it meant leaving a comfortable life or trying to use a mule to prove a point of theology. And the other thing was that he had such love for Christ. One of the things you see a lot of pictures of St. Anthony is him holding the Christ child. And there's a story that he was traveling through southern France and he stopped at some poor inn. And the innkeeper was going to bed and he saw a bright light coming from underneath St. Anthony's door. He opened the door slightly and there was St. Anthony with this beautiful child. And they were both making sweet sounds to each other. And the innkeeper knew who the visitor was to St. Anthony. St. Anthony only lived to be 36, but he was so revered for his teaching and his ability to talk to people that he was made a doctor of the church in 1946 for the quality, the depth, the breadth, the love of his preaching. All so much in such a short time? That's what happens when we give our hearts to the will of God. And remember, this saint could be you.